Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Spirit of Prophecy podcast. We are live tonight, so make sure you let me know if there are any audio or video issues in the live chat. And I appreciate everyone who's going to join us live tonight. I have a first-time guest on the Spirit of Prophecy.
Is it the first time on here?
First time on the Spirit of Prophecy, yes.
Nice.
And I didn't tell you about this, but this is historic. This is the first female guest I have had on the Spirit of Prophecy podcast.
I feel honored.
Now, she's not the first female I've invited. I've invited probably 3 or 4, but it's always been like too big of names, and I've never been able to get them on.
I'm not a big name.
The program, and so, you're a big name, spoken of in many places on a regular basis. Subject material in a lot of places, a lot of weird places. I think they call them churches still, but yeah. But at the same time, my wife, so I get special privileges, and so I am glad to have her on the program. The subject matter we're going to be discussing tonight, I figured I would have her on because I felt like it was more along the lines of what she covers on her program. However, I felt it necessary to cover it on this program because I do talk about a lot of things in the Baptist world, independent fundamental Baptist world. And the Duggars are people who get associated with independent fundamental Baptists, even though they are kind of a unique wing of independent fundamental Baptists. But there's definitely a lot of things that we have in common. There's many things that are similar. In fact, I went back and I was looking at some pictures today from when we saw the Duggars several years ago. And I remember, I couldn't remember where it was, but there was a picture somebody had posted of the Duggars, and my wife was one of the people in the picture. And I think they thought she was a Duggar too, because
I think it made the paper. I've tried Googling it and I can't find it, but it was like in the paper for Dixon, and it said Duggar sisters or something.
Right.
I dressed like them. I did my hair like them. That was the style back then.
Yes. And we did all that stuff before the Duggars were on TV too, by the way.
I didn't do it to copy them.
Right. But at the same time, the Duggars, they were a huge hit in our family just because, we're homeschooling our families. We're Baptist, we're conservative. When it came to a lot of the rules and things they were known for, these were things that we also practiced as well, with slight variations here and there. So watching a reality show about somebody like that was interesting. I didn't watch it that much just because reality TV has always irritated me greatly.
You never liked it.
No, but it was often on in our house. And so I would catch episodes here and there. Our kids liked it. And the time we saw them, we were actually getting ready to go to a missions conference, but we made time to go to a Rick Santorum rally. This would have been during, I guess, during the 2012 primary. And they were traveling around with him, and we didn't really care about Rick Santorum, but we thought, hey, the Duggars are going to be with him. Let's go see the Duggars. And so obviously they were celebrities in the IFB world, in the world that we were from. And so obviously when the scandal started happening, it, shocked everybody. I think upset people quite a bit. And when it comes to things like this, if I may just take a few moments to deal with IFB sensitivities, whenever we address these things, Baptists, they get all bent out of shape. Well, we just need to pray and not really say anything about it. This is serious stuff. And, we don't want to judge, whenever it's something serious, like sexual sins and things like that. Now, if they'd have changed on their music or something like that, or their dress standards, then, we'd be nailing their hide to the wall. And we'd be calling on all Baptists everywhere to say something about it. So spare me your nonsense. No, we're going to talk about these things. These things do get associated with people like us. When people like them mess up, there are things that people blame that should not be blamed. And I just don't think that's fair. And I just want to say this too. When it comes to what happened in the Duggar household, we have no idea. We did not know them personally. We were not around their house. We were not around them enough to know. But at the same time, too, there are things that I know are biblical that many people are using what happened to attack. And obviously that's not fair. Many people too who practice these things, whenever stuff like this happens, they start to wonder, are these things even right? Because many people, they do all the things they do. They have all the rules that they have, trying to avoid the very things that happen. You know, we have rules about television and internet and with cell phones and all these things because we don't want our children becoming perverts and things like that. And so when something like that happens, and it's like, man, these people, they had all these rules and it still happened. And then, you're going to have certain groups out there. Well, it's because you have rules. You need to throw out the rules and just let kids do what they want. And obviously that's not right either. So again, we don't know for sure what happened. We wonder ourselves, but I am going to give a few things that I wrote down that I think are possibilities, because, and I say this too, as somebody who, I don't know the Duggars, but I definitely know people like them, people from their world. We've come across them many times throughout the years in the ministry. I've seen many similar things happen. And so these are just some things that we should all consider, some good principles when it comes to these things. But again, if you have any questions in the live chat along these lines, leave those. I'll try to pay attention to them and get to them at some point in the program. But before we get started, tell everybody quickly, in case they don't know about your channel, about Gently Led Sisters.
I started Gently Led Sisters about 8 years ago, I believe. At that point, we had a 16-year-old. I believe Tommy was 16 years old. And he, a lot of it was unknown to me. I was kind of figuring this thing out as we went. And so I had hopes that it would work with raising our children. And I've been able to fine tune the advice. I mainly talk about loving God, loving your husband, and loving your kids, and loving them well. That's kind of my motto for the show. I'm obviously more traditional, even though some would say I'm a rabid feminist, but I'm not. I promote traditional roles. I promote all that stuff. And now we've raised half our kids. 8 years into the channel, we've raised half our kids. We've accomplished so far what we've tried to set out to accomplish when raising our children. And I'm very, very pleased with the outcome. And it's just from watching people in our own life. It's from watching godly people who went on before us. And that's why I think Duggars fascinate both of us so much, because we've always tried in our life, we've always tried to look for good examples and bad examples. And then we've tried to say, okay, this is a really bad example. What could have gone wrong? And where are we doing any of these things? Can we fine tune things? Can we tweak things? And I don't want to neither one of us have arrived. We're always learning. And I think every phase of our children's lives has thrown us for a loop, and we've had to kind of figure things out and revamp and, how are we going to do this going forward? Because our goal has never been to get our kids to 18 and then we're good. Right. So that's not our goal with raising our children. And we want to continue being an influence in our children's lives until we die, and our grandchildren's lives until we die.
Right.
So
yeah. And so again, when when you're watching the Duggars, they were like the superstar family, a ton of kids, looked perfect. And I think, it's my opinion, I think there was a lot of genuineness there. But we'll talk about some of that. But we've got Preacher Boys podcast on incoming Steven Anderson rant for you having your wife be a female co-host on your podcast.
Probably.
Even though for over 3 years I've had this podcast, and this is my first female guest, and it's my wife. This is going to give them ammo to continue calling me a hardcore feminist. And so
no, you're the simp. I'm the feminist.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm Mr. Tommy or Mr. Cassie McMurtry.
Oh, yes.
Which, I don't get insulted by that. I'm not intimidated by having a powerful, influential wife. I can handle that kind of thing. And so whenever people try to insult me with that, well, they're complimenting my wife. And since she's my better half, it's a compliment to me. So, and
it takes a strong man to be married to a strong woman.
That's right. But I told Eric that if he wants, he can come on the program and give his side. He's been all over all the Duggar scandals recently and in the past. And He is, of course, on the opposing side when it comes to these things. And he will use these things to attack things that we stand for. But I still think we're in the right on these things. But if at any point he wants to join in, I invited him to come on the program because this isn't technically an public square discussion, but for him, I will make an exception. We'll make this a public square discussion just because we aren't afraid of opposition on this program. And
And
so
you'll be polite.
absolutely. Yeah, no, me and Eric, we are, how would we talk about our relationship?
Friendly enemies, maybe?
Yeah. I mean,
Frenemies?
I think we're
Frenemies?
both mean to each other too.
But you do it in a good
Yeah,
spirit?
yeah, we're very honest with each other in a very civil way. And so I've definitely thrown my insults at him, and he's done some stuff about me too. But again, I can handle it.
I don't disagree with everything he does. I think we should be exposing abuse.
Right.
I don't believe in cover.
I just don't. Yeah, I don't always
So-
appreciate everybody he goes after.
Yeah.
Going after Tony Hudson pretty hard. Come on. Anyway, but anyway, so I do want to talk about some things that observations, possibilities, things that we should all think about and watch for. And I think these are things specifically geared towards people like us, independent fundamental Baptists. These are errors that we are more likely to get caught up into. So unfortunately, he cannot jump on today. Feeling FOMO. What does that mean? Or fear of missing out. Oh, okay. Fear of missing out. That's right. So, all right. Well, we invited him.
We'll miss
but
you, Eric.
it was last minute. But anyway,
You're not scared.
he's not. Yeah, he's not too scared. Okay.
No, he said I'm too scared.
Oh,
He's
he
not.
is too scared.
I'm saying he's not scared.
Okay. Now I think Eric he was on my other channel before, and I think that was a fun discussion. And I got so many people mad at me that I even had him on the program, and I didn't care. Baptists, we've got to stop talking about opposition all the time and actually face them and confront them
Exactly.
publicly in a fair fight. And when you think you're tougher than somebody, you want to face them in a fair fight. And when you really think you're tougher than somebody, you want to give them an unfair advantage. And that's why we do things the way we do in this program. We try to give people an unfair advantage so we can just show how dominant we are over them. And that might sound a little braggadocious, but I have to be honest. So anyway, so when it comes to what happened, one of the things that I do think is worth considering and we're talking about is the possibility that maybe they were too strict. It is possible to be too strict on some things, but because there are some things we should all do as Christians, and there's things also though, while everybody should do them, there are some things we have to make ourselves do them. There are going to be times when you don't feel like doing something God has commanded you to do, and when that happens, you ought to do it anyway. And sometimes we've got to motivate ourselves, kick ourselves in the pants to do some things. But sometimes in the Christian world, you'll have certain people doing things because they genuinely want to. I mean, they are at every possible, church at function. They will travel around to every revival meeting and every camp meeting because that is what they love to do. And that's why they're doing it, because they love it. And then you have other people, they think, I have to do this in order to survive as a Christian, and they burn themselves out in these things. And it's like, you don't have to do that much. You don't have to, be at church 7 days a week and things like that. And, there are a lot of people in Christianity are doing things to an extreme simply because that's just who they are. That's what they enjoy doing. But then you have others that are just kind of copying other people, and they're miserable doing these things, and they're making everybody else miserable. And so sometimes I wonder about that with people. It's like, don't ask too much of your family. Don't ask them to do things that are too difficult. Again, some things, I think you ought to go to church even if you don't feel like it. I think Christians ought to try winning souls, even if they don't feel like it. But some people, they go soul winning more than once a week. they'll even go souling on their vacations and things because that's just what they want to do. Other people, it might be more of a chore for them, and you don't want to turn the things of God into like a punishment or something like that. So
when you say too strict, are you specifically talking about like church attendance? Are you talking about overall? Are you talking about
across the
movies,
board,
dress standards?
yeah,
music?
I think across the board, not even just too strict, but just like too extreme on things.
I would say too extreme.
Yeah, too extreme is probably a better way to put it. Just sometimes we want to be so spiritual, we never have any fun.
Yeah.
And kids need to have fun, and it's okay to have fun, but again, there's some things that, are fun for other people that, that are of God, like going to camp meetings and stuff. When we were growing up, we went to those all the time, and I loved it. I absolutely enjoyed going to the camp meetings, revival meetings. I thoroughly enjoyed those things, and they, I think, had a good impression on me. They were a good influence on me. It seemed like many of our vacations, were often centered around some kind of meeting somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
We would go to the meeting and do a lot of that, but then we would do some fun stuff too. But I genuinely enjoyed that. But at the same time, I don't think Christians are required to, spend all their vacation time doing stuff like that. I think there was a greater interest in stuff like that with my dad being a pastor, obviously, but then other people might try copying that and their family might hate it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why are we doing these things?
Well, one of the things that the Duggars were known for was they were known for their dress standards, right? And, obviously a lot of Baptist women liked that show because it just made them appear normal, because we're used to being in public and getting lots of looks because we have a lot of girls and we're all in skirts or dresses or whatever. But I just told you the other day, I was like, who cares if you have dress standards if you're molesting a little girl?
Right.
Who cares if your wife wears a skirt and you're molesting a little girl? And so they focus so much on the outward appearance, which I'm all for standards, yet they had all of this just perversion, in them that came out through their actions. So I don't know, that really.
Yeah. Well, it ends up becoming hypocrisy. Yeah. And, because the priorities are wrong. You tithe of mint and anise and cumin, but you omit the weightier matters of the law. And I just preached about that Sunday night. You have people just emphasizing things that are good, but while ignoring more important things. And that makes you a hypocrite when you do that kind of thing. And the reality is the easiest thing to, to mimic are the outward things. Any lady can put on a dress, they can dress a certain way, do their hair a certain way. The outward things are the easiest things to imitate. Really and for many people too, like for our family growing up, we always dressed that way. I mean, I never even gave it a second thought, didn't think anything of it. Also too, I think when it comes to the dress and things like that, for some people, especially if they didn't grow up that way, they feel very weird, dressing like a Christian, wearing skirts and all that kind of stuff, even though, I don't know, I don't think people even care that much or notice that much, but often they feel like they do. And it can be kind of traumatic for them. And so, I do think dads need to, they need to be gentle in leading their family. If they were from a more liberal background and becoming conservative, you need to understand how much harder that is for your wife and your daughters than it is for you as a man. Because as a man, we can still follow all the Baptist rules.
You don't attract
and
any
blend
attention.
and not attract any attention. So it's easy for us, but for the ladies, it's a little bit harder. And so the thing is, though, for us, it just wasn't a problem because, we went to church. We've been in church our whole life with other people that did the same thing. We had a lot of Baptists in our family that did the same thing. We traveled around to churches everywhere on a regular basis, fellowshipping with other like-minded churches. And so I never felt weird or alone when it came to those things. But in a lot of these families, especially people too, that were involved in IBLP, a lot of them, they watched the videos and things that they had back in the day. They would go to the occasional, meetings and things like that. But a lot of those people were very isolated And
Very
a
isolated.
lot of the Gothard types that came through our church, they were always too good for any church. And a lot of them home church and things like that. Well, you're going to even make your family feel like bigger freaks if you do that kind of thing. And, and so that was one of the, growing up, we were aware of the Gothard types, and most of the people in our circles didn't like them very much. And they liked the standards. They liked many of the things that they had going for them. But at the same time, they didn't like the fact they weren't strong local church people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was why a lot of the Baptist preachers didn't like the Gothard crowd when they would come through their churches. They were not strong local church people. They were not soul winners. That was one of the things, I say, they're not soul winners. You could not get those people to go out and knock doors or anything like that. They were not evangelistic. They wanted to be isolated. They want your church to be isolated. And they would come into your church and they would look at everybody who maybe didn't have all the dress standards, maybe had families in your church who had kids in public school, and they didn't want their kids being defiled by the public school kids. And they didn't even want their kids being defiled by half the Christian school kids because, some of those Christian school kids talked about Disney movies and, there was always, they were just very judgmental, and they were so protective of their children. They just hated everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And kids they don't naturally hate people,
Right.
And they especially don't naturally hate other kids. Kids just naturally want to get along with other kids and play and have fun. And, but often they learn all this judgmental nonsense from the parents, and it just makes the kids bitter, personally.
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, so I think too, when it comes to a lot of this strictness too, I think the extreme focus, Eric, he's always talking about the purity culture and things like that. And again, I never really know for sure what he's talking about, when it comes to that, because it's like, obviously
I think he's talking about like just the topic of sex is so taboo.
Right.
Like, they don't know anything going into marriage. You never talk about it. You almost make it weird and creepy.
Right.
Which I don't agree. That's when I think of purity culture, I think of biblical purity, which is just sex within the bounds of marriage, and keeping yourself pure until you're married. That's what I'm thinking of when I think of biblical purity. And obviously it's worked well in our life. It's worked well in lives of other Christians that we've seen. So we have a positive, right? We have a positive view on biblical purity is what I would define it. But purity culture, I think, is different. And I think one of the reasons that he harps on it is because oftentimes girls that are being abused in homes that promote the purity culture, they don't even know what's going on. Right. So they don't know that they're being abused. They don't have anyone to tell about being abused. And I think, yes, that just comes down to communication with your kids. Right. Just having open communication and talking about, abuse even.
Yeah, I think because in that world, they were so hyper focused on keeping the kids pure. I think on certain things, they almost wait too long to talk to them, while at the same time making them aware of things too young too. When you're just constantly, just like you talked about the Nike thing they would do.
Yeah.
If a woman wasn't dressed right.
Like she was wearing a pair of shorts, they would yell Nike and everyone had to look away or look at the ground or whatever.
Yeah, that just makes you think about it more. It's kind of like if I tell you don't think about a polka dot elephant right now, you're going to think about a polka dot elephant. That's just kind of the way our mind works, And, even the Apostle Paul, he talked about in Romans chapter 7, how, when the commandment came, I have it in front of me, he said, but sin taking occasion by the commandment wrought in me all manner of concupiscence. For without the law, sin was dead. And that a lot of times the law, the rule, it makes you think about that thing. If you put a sign up on something that says don't touch, now all of a sudden you want to touch. And so there's a lot of things that kids just aren't even going to be thinking about. But then when you're immediately having all these, really strict rules on things that they're not even going to be thinking about, now you're just getting them thinking about it earlier. And then when you make it all weird, creepy, taboo and all that, it can almost just make them more curious about it. And I think as parents, it's just important that you observe your children And, I don't know when the ages are for sure to start talking about things, but, when you start seeing them notice certain things and responding to certain things, you just need to discuss it and don't make them feel like they're a pervert for thinking about something and noticing something. It's pretty normal. And,
And as our kids get older, we obviously get more comfortable with this.
mhm,
I think we kind of didn't know. Obviously, we didn't know what we were doing when we first started raising kids. So our oldest was our guinea pig, and
mhm,
we probably could have been a little bit more open with him because he's brought it up before. He's like, I had to learn things, later when I started working a job, and so we probably could have, but we didn't want to feed too much information either and
mhm,
get him thinking about it. But I know another weird thing that was kind of a red flag with the Duggars was she was very big. Michelle was very big on like, we don't let little girls sit on big boys' laps.
mhm,
And I'm thinking that it's the over sexualization,
mhm.
I think, is there was a lot of over sexualization. And
Yeah.
I don't know how long they had problems with Josh, because obviously the problems with Josh started very early in the home
Mhm,
where he did stuff to his sisters. And maybe that's why they had a hyper view of it.
mhm,
I don't know. But like when we have our two older sister boys, we never like it was not weird for our daughters to sit on their laps. You know
mm-mm.
what I mean? There was nothing weird or sexual about it.
Right.
So the fact that our little girls never sit on our bigger boys' laps, that was just really weird to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Because one of the things that Eric has brought up before that is true, I think his solution's terrible, but he does talk a lot about how IFB people, they're just not taught anything. They're not well prepared, when it comes to even when they go into marriage, just all the sexual stuff. And that is true. And that's a hard thing. It is a hard thing to talk about, it's definitely something I don't think a lot of preachers want to get up and get too specific about from the pulpit. I sure know I don't.
I feel like that's been more my department anyways.
Yeah, I think
I'm more open with the kids about it than you are,
yeah, I think
honestly.
ultimately it's up to the parents.
Yeah.
But the problem is most parents don't know what to do when
No.
it comes to these things. And that is true. Now, the thing is, I'm not going to get my advice from the people that he has, that are on come give solutions, people that are pro sodomites and,
Right.
all the stuff that's being promoted in the public schools. Obviously, that's not going to work. And our world is not doing any better when it comes to these things because, I mean, look at what's happening in the world with just all the
Well, you don't want to go as far as the public schools
right.
where
Yeah,
they're doing like
they're not helping
no.
anything. They're
No.
they're way worse. And again, one of the things I do want to at one point I do want to make, you know, when you have 19 kids, there's a good chance you're gonna have some bad eggs in there
Yeah, I
for
mean,
sure.
this is 2 out of 19,
Right, yeah.
so
Um, so there is that, but at the same time too, it's a bigger deal when it comes from a family like them that is so
mm,
strict.
yeah.
Because in the IFB world, we're the ones that are screaming about the sodomites and the perversion and impurity and all that kind of stuff. And so, of course, the people who don't like hearing that are going to love it when somebody on our side falls.
Well, I
They're
don't
going to
think
go
they're
they're going
gonna
to go
love
nuts over
it
that.
because there was still innocent kids that got hurt, and
Right, but
that's what makes me the most upset about this Duggar stuff. It's kids.
I
It's
know.
kids that have been hurt.
Yeah.
It would even be, in my mind, like, even Josh and the whole Ashley Madison thing.
Mhm.
Is that the right name? Even him with that scandal, it was okay, it was another woman. But then when the stuff came out that he had on his computer
Mhm. Right.
and in the graphic nature, and then now here's another child being hurt, and they're going to carry that for the rest of their lives. And then this, pornography that he got involved in, these are normally human trafficked kids, and
Mhm.
it's horrendous. And so that's what makes me the most upset. It's not even that it's hypocrisy, because it is, but it's hurting little
Yeah.
kids.
Well, and I do have a few points that I think are very strong possibilities because of just how bad some of these things have been
Mm,
that they have done. We'll get to some of those. But another thing too, and I want everybody to get a hold of this, especially if you are Baptist, and that is, I do think they might have depended too much on their rules. And in the Baptist world, we love our rules. And we often think, all right, if I have all these rules, then that will protect my family. And that's not necessarily true. Okay. Growing up in the 90s, there was a lot of preaching I remember hearing about, here's 5 steps to just guaranteed outcomes and things like that. And it's just like
a checklist type thing.
Yeah, that checklist mentality was really bad back in those days, and it just didn't work. And let me just say, there is a checklist that if you followed it, you would definitely succeed. It's called the law. If you do everything that is written in the law, you will get all the blessings that come with the law. But what you people never figured out is that nobody can keep the law. We all need grace. And usually these extremely strict families often don't have grace. They're so dependent on their keeping of the law. And of course, it's never the whole law. It's always hypocritical. It's like a set of laws that they like. It's a set of laws and rules that are popular in the group and the crowd that they run with. If we do all these things, we're good Baptists, we're good IBLP people, whatever group they're running with. These things make me all this, and then I'm safe, I'm protected. That's not true. Okay. Everyone is dependent on grace. There are all kinds of people out there who don't have all your rules, and their kids are going to turn out just fine. And there's people out there who have rules that are stricter than yours, and they're going to turn out a bunch of reprobates. You know why? Because at the end of the day, we are all dependent on God's grace. And so extreme rules, they're just no guarantee of anything. If you live by the law, you're going to die by the law. And you can make up your own law if you want, and you can tell yourself this is a guarantee. But law people always prove themselves to be hypocrite. You won't even keep your own law. And that's how the Pharisees were. They didn't even do the things that they said that they practice. And so, I don't understand why Christians who understand that salvation is by grace through faith without works, that it's eternal, I don't understand why we can't figure out how to live by grace as well. And living by grace does not mean living in lasciviousness. That's not what that means at all. But living by grace, we understand we do our best for God. We try to walk in the Spirit the best we can, but always depending on God's grace and mercy. That without it, we are all in trouble. And so you will always find people who had less rules than you, who did way better than you. And you'll always find people who had more rules than you, who did way worse than you.
It's because they're missing the spirit of everything. They just want, it's easier if someone just gives me a manual. Like, here's a manual, and that's why so many people pattern their life after another individual. Oh, this individual's favorite color is blue. My favorite color is blue. Oh, this individual, when they spank their kids, they give them 20 swats. That's the new number, 20 swats. So they do whatever. It's just easier. Yeah. They don't have to follow the Holy Spirit. They don't have to follow the spirit of anything. It's all bring the hammer down. I'm going to beat it out of my kid. And it doesn't work. It fails.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a real bad mentality, but it's a really common thing. And, people just, we need to learn to trust the Lord in more things. We trust him with our eternal souls for salvation. I don't understand why we can't do the same thing when it comes to our families. And just as we understand, just because we're saved doesn't mean we're going to go out and live a lascivious life. As parents, it's the same thing. We're depending on God's grace to help us, but we're not going to not care what the Bible says. We're not just going to go against what the Bible says. We're going to do the best we can. We're going to try to honor God. But again, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Everyone I've ever heard who said they did everything right always failed. Everyone who I have ever seen that is successful in raising good kids, if you ask them how they did it, it's, usually just praise the Lord. I don't know. They give all glory to God because they are as aware of anyone else that they have made all kinds of mistakes in raising their kids. And so because of that, they give glory to God. Just as we rightfully, when people ask us how we're saved, we give all glory to Jesus Christ because we understand all the mistakes we make. We all understand how we come short. We all come short as parents. And train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That is an absolute truth.
No, that's just a proverb.
That is an absolute
That's just a
truth.
Proverb.
Okay. You've been listening to too many weirdo
We're
Baptists.
not Calvinists.
Right. No,
we're not Calvinists.
But, and so understand that is an absolute truth. But here's the thing. If you're a fool to think that you have done everything you're supposed to do.
Hmm.
You're a fool if you think that. And I believe that verse, but I don't believe I've done everything that I should. I don't believe I've been exactly right in my training, but you know what? God's been gracious. And you know what? Just because we can't keep the law doesn't mean we just give up now. And so just because I've messed up before with my children doesn't mean I just give up. It doesn't mean I now just forget train up a child in the way you should go. No, I'm still going to do my best on those things, but I'm always going to do it depending on the grace of God. And I hope I am never so foolish. If all 8 of our kids turn out great and serve the Lord, and someday when I'm 80 years old, looking back and, I hope I'm not so foolish as to be like, I did everything right. No, I think I'm still going to be well aware of the fact that God was very good and God was very gracious to us. And that needs to be the attitude. We're supposed to give God the glory on things.
Well, I think a lot of it comes from a place of fear. A lot of the over the top stuff, the bring down the hammer, it's a place of fear. Maybe these were like first generation Christians that have no idea. And I don't know if the Duggars, I don't know if they were first generation or second generation, but well, I think a lot of it is because they were following the teachings of Bill Gothard at the beginning. He was over the top with everything. But I think it's a fear-based parenting. It's not a spirit-led parenting is how I would describe it.
Yeah. And I do think it is interesting that I wonder if the stuff with Josh is what made them so strict. Because
it might be, because I think that started young. And then obviously we can speculate. I don't want to speculate about him, but oftentimes those who are abused turn into abusers.
Yeah.
They learn that behavior from somewhere. And that's why it's not natural. It's not natural for young kids to be doing that to other kids. It's oftentimes a learned behavior.
Right.
And so it's very maybe that's why they were over the top with stuff like that.
I've got some other points that go along with that, the possibility. But another thing too that I've observed from them, and this irritates me greatly, and I hate when parents do this. IFB does the same thing too, but it seems that they thought that salvation would fix the fleshly problems that their children had.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like too, when they talked about what had happened with Josh, it was like they went and sent him away and he got saved.
Yeah.
And I observed this so much growing up in church, being a youth director. I've observed this in other churches, but often teenagers, when they would get in a lot of trouble, they would always get saved after that. And that would
get saved.
Yeah. And when I say get saved, in quotations.
Yeah.
And it was so frustrating because it was clear that, the parents were upset. They were devastated at what their child had done. He was, he knew he was in trouble. They feel bad for what they did. But a lot of times I think they're just upset. They're in so much trouble for what they did. But then it was just like, if they, whenever you're in trouble with your parents, and I remember I got in trouble a lot growing up. When you're in trouble, you just want to calm them down. You want the trouble to end. But a lot of times, if you're doing bad things, your parents start getting concerned. They start wondering, what's wrong with you? Are you going down this terrible path? Are you going to be, a bum and a loser when you grow up? They're worried about all these things. And so how do you convince them? Even if you are, if you were doing something that was really bad, how do you convince your parents that you're not going to do it again? Well, sometimes it's helpful if you get saved. Because now it's like, well, that was back when that was the old man. That was before I got saved.
I got talking in a goat voice at 12.
But I really got it this time, Mom and Dad. I went to the youth conference and I went and I filled out the decision card. And I'm giving up all my sin. And I'm not going to be dealing with the lust of the flesh ever again. Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
You're always going to have the lust of the flesh that you have to learn how to fight against. But teenagers, that happens all the time. And then it's like the parents like, okay, good. We can calm down now. They're saved. They're not going to want to do this anymore. Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. There's always going to be that temptation there. And often the reason they're getting caught up in all these things, they do have a character problem, and you need to realize, hey, our child has a serious character problem. We've got to do something about this. We've got to work on this. And if you think that them just going and getting saved is all of a sudden going to make all their fleshly problems go away. It's just not true. That's not how salvation works. It will, I mean, it will help if they're really getting saved, but half the time, I think these kids probably already are saved, or and if they weren't already saved, I don't think they're all of a sudden saved now. Because I think the real reason the kids are praying to get saved is so their parents, please save me from this 6 months of grounding my parents are thinking will work, save me from military school that they're threatening to send me to, that's what they want saved from.
That, or there's another possibility too. They've been to church and they've heard, if you say you got saved, but then your salvation won't even get you into church on Sunday, I really doubt it.
Yeah.
If you say you're saved, but then you still struggle with drinking and smoking and blah, 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 then I really doubt it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's that too.
Yeah.
They're not taught the difference between living in the spirit versus living in the flesh.
Yeah. There's a lot of bad preaching in the IFB when it comes to that kind of thing.
Bad preaching. Yeah.
That's a huge, huge part of the problem. And somebody needs to teach these teenagers that, hey, just because you're saved doesn't mean you're not going to struggle with sin. Doesn't mean you're going to not have temptations. No, they're going to be there, and you've got to learn. You've got to teach them how to get victory over the flesh. The flesh is always going to be there. It's always going to be a problem. And so I think when you do that to your kid, you just distort salvation in their minds. They need to understand that, hey, just because you did the sin, it doesn't mean you're not saved, but it does mean you are showing very poor character. You are, taking advantage of the grace of God as a child of God. You are a child of God. You shouldn't act that way. There were things that I never expected my children to do because they were my children. Mm-hmm. I had certain expectations because they were my children. And so, but did that mean I didn't think they were capable of doing those things? Of course not. But at the same time, they knew better. They had been taught right. They didn't have to do those things. And it's the same thing too as a child of God. As a child of God, we can do better. We know better, but it doesn't mean we're not capable of doing much worse and not living up to what we are in Christ. And when we do that kind of thing, it is something that we ought to be ashamed of. It's something we ought to be harshly rebuked for, something we ought to be chastened for. And God does chasten his children because we mess up. And so, I saw one of the videos I was watching today, and that came up and it just kind of upset me because I really think that's a problem. And I don't think we're going to help our children get victory over the lust of the flesh when they don't even have assurance of their salvation.
Right.
I think that's one of the first things they need to have in order to get victory no, you are a child of God. You are to reckon yourself. Paul often referred to as reckoning yourselves dead to sin. That needs to be our mindset. That's how we need to think about ourselves and who we are in Christ. And if you, as somebody who's trying to live like a Christian, can't even figure out if you are for sure, you're not going to know what to do. But why did he say to reckon yourself that way? Why didn't he just say, you are that, therefore you don't have to worry about it anymore? No, because you still have the old man, you still have the flesh, and no matter what the Calvinists say, they're wrong. You're still going to have some major struggles with sin, and we've got to teach people that. And so just making them get saved over and over again is not good. But another thing too, a possibility that I thought is that their family, or that the children, this is just one possibility. Okay. I'm not saying any of these things were it. These are all things we need to think of, but this was something I was thinking about on one of the videos I was watching where they were kind of analyzing some of the things. But a thought that came to my mind is that some of them, as adults, when they became adults, like for example, the second one that got in trouble, maybe he didn't do anything growing up. Joseph. Yeah. But many of them may have been so innocent, they didn't know what it was like to deal with temptation. And I think I've seen that a lot with kids who were very sheltered. They were so sheltered in their life that they don't know how to deal with temptation.
And that's what Eric would lump purity culture in.
Right. And it is a possibility that again, I don't think we need to subject our children to temptation. Okay. But at the same time, we do need to prepare them for temptation. We do need to give them some responsibility, and we need to watch and see what they do with it. And so, but I've observed this a lot in my ministry, that people who are extremely sheltered, growing up, a lot of times they get into their adult years, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're well in our 20s. This is socially awkward that we're still living at home. And they'll just kind of get out on their own. They've got television, they've got the internet, and they've got their smartphones, and they're on their own. And they don't really have that accountability anymore. And they've never been tempted before. And now there's just all this access to things that can get them in a lot more trouble. And they don't know how to handle it. Many of them, I mean, I know people that their parents don't want them to get a job because they don't want them to get them corrupted by all the bad people that they're going to work with, who are going to use bad words and all that kind of stuff. And hey, I mean, I was sheltered growing up for sure, but my dad threw me into the workforce right when I turned 16, and I got a job at McDonald's, and man, I was horrified by all the things that I saw there.
Threw our boys into it at 12.
Yeah. We had them detasseling, and they've talked about how on a bus, was the first time they heard the F word.
At least it wasn't in a Baptist church.
Yes. Well, and so they've told that story before, and I was where I actually learned where the F word was. I actually learned where the F word was in a courthouse. We took a field trip to the courthouse to go watch a trial that was going on. And they had pews in there, like church pews. And somebody on the back of the pew had carved in the F word.
That's probably where I saw it first. It was like in a bathroom stall or something.
And I knew there was an F word. I just didn't know what it was. But when I saw that, I was like, I'll bet that's the F word. And of course,
I've never heard that story before.
So I don't know how old I was. I was pretty young, but that
Hopefully you didn't say it.
No.
Did you ask your parents about it?
No. It was one of those things. I was afraid to say it, but it was just kind of in my brain, and I then knew what it was. And then, I started noticing it places. You'd see it in the bathroom stalls and stuff. And then eventually it's just like, this is it. But I mean, I didn't hear it that often. I don't really remember hearing it much at all.
I feel like that's a newer thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
We didn't grow up hearing that. Like, it was a rated R movie if they had an F word in it.
Yeah. I definitely never heard on a movie or anything.
No.
But then I remember when I started working at McDonald's, it was just like everyone was saying it. And I'm just like, what is happening? What is wrong with these people? But I mean, again, I was innocent. In fact, I remember one of the ladies I worked with, her boyfriend, was actually her boyfriend's mom went to our church. Now, we knew this guy wasn't saved. She had mentioned before to pray for him to get saved. This guy wasn't even saved, but he never came to the church. But I started working with this lady that lived with him, and so I just assumed they were married. And then I remember one day she was like talking, and every once in a while I would hear her talking about different things. And then I realized, wait, they're not married. And then I remember I heard her saying something about, getting out of bed, him getting out of bed that morning or something. I'm like, are they sleeping in the same bed? And then I remember I finally, after a couple of weeks, I put two and two together. I'm like, these people are shagging up. I couldn't believe it. I'm thinking his mom is a Baptist. How could he be? And then I found out like pretty much every woman in there was shacking up with somebody. I did not realize that was that's how innocent I was at 16 years old. So, but thankfully everything turned out fine for me. But, I do think you can just be so sheltering that they've just never faced temptation before. And that's why you have to develop character in them. And with my dad, that was something too. While he wanted us to be innocent and everything, he did try to instill character in me. And I remember one of my first temptations, where I had to like take a stand. I was probably 14 or 15, and I wanted to get a paper out. and one of my friends had a paper out. And I remember I rode with a lady who was like showing me what the route would be and everything. And then I remember we got to this one place where we're supposed to deliver paper, and it was a bar. And she's just like, just go take it and put it on the bar. And I'm like, I was like, I can't go in there.
Mm-mm.
She's like, what? I can't go in a bar. I said,
You're a
I
McMurtry.
was like,
You don't go into
if
bars.
I do this job, I said, I won't be able to deliver there. And I told her that, and she's like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, I guess we can make exception and everything. But I remember her talking to my dad and telling him about it, and like dad was just, he was so proud. It was like,
That's his thing.
that
Drinking.
that's
from
my
your
son,
dad.
and I
Yeah.
was, but I remember too, just being scared. I was like, man, she's going to be so upset. But I was like, it's like, I can't go in a bar. I can't do that. And so, give your kids opportunities to do things and see what happens. And if you find out the first time they go to tasseling, they come back saying the F word, all right, you got a lot of work to do, because, your kid's very easily influenced. If the first time they go hang out at their friend's house, they smoke a joint, they've got some serious problems. You got to really work on developing some character in them. And the thing is, in these real strict homes, the problem is after you turn 18 and you become an adult, your potential mistakes you can make can land you in jail and get you in way more trouble.
Mm.
And so I think that happens to a lot of these really sheltered, innocent kids. They've never dealt with temptation before. And now the first time they're dealing with temptation, it's as an adult when they're capable of doing things that'll get them landed in jail. Or when you're 15 and 16.
Or just altering the course of their life.
Yeah.
Ending up with a child out of wedlock. I mean, ending up with, charges on the record.
Because another thing too, I thought of in one of the discussions I was listening to is that I do think that it could be possible too. And I'm not saying we're wrong in protecting our kids from these things. We're not wrong, but we still have to train and prepare. We live in we have a very wicked world that we live in. But I think too, some have been so sheltered. They've been so protected from sin. They have no idea what shame and regret feels like. And you think about it, like, especially when it comes to physical relationships and boyfriend, girlfriend, and all that. I mean, you've got kids in school starting relationships at very young ages, which is a horrible idea. But at the same time, by the time these kids hit 18, they've already been embarrassed big time. They already have all kinds of regret. And so the thing is, by the time they get into that age where all of a sudden things are illegal, they already know what shame and regret feels like. They've already tried a bunch of stuff and found out it's not what they thought it was. And they know from experience that, these things are not going to make me happy. They're not going to make me satisfied. And so then they become functioning adults, where many people who grow up in Christian homes, we've never done anything to be ashamed of. We don't really have any regrets. We never even had a chance to make any mistakes.
I mean, that's not saying we were perfect.
No, but I'm saying in like any significant way.
Like life-altering choices.
Right. But the thing is, then you become an adult, and the things that you do can get you in so much more trouble. And then if you're somebody like a Duggar, you're well known, then it's even worse in that situation. And so I think even starting at a young age, just dealing with temptations, developing that character, all of that matters and helps. And just making sure when you do become an adult and you get in a lot more trouble, you're less likely to do it. And so I'm not telling you, throw your kids to the wolves, but they eventually are going to enter into a world of wolves. So we got to prepare them for it. One of the things that I remember, conversations I remember having with our boys too, is like, hey, now you're 18. You need to be aware of how much trouble you can get yourself into.
Yeah. With everything.
Right. Things that a 17-year-old could do, with a 17-year-old girl, whether it be in person or online. While it wouldn't get you in that much trouble then, it can get you thrown in jail now. You need to be aware. And there's a lot of 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old, they're adult men, but they have the brain of a teenager in many ways. There's a lot of very immature Christian kids.
Mhm.
And so the thing is, while it's very illegal for them to be involved with the 17-year-old, sometimes they're like on equal,
Mhm.
you know, they're kind of on an equal level when it comes to those things. But at the same time, it's still illegal,
Right,
and
by
they
law.
can get themselves in a lot of trouble, and they
Mhm.
need to be aware of that. It's so important to make sure your kids are aware of just how much trouble they can get into. And so,
Can I read this?
yeah.
It's very long, but I think it was very good
Mhm.
by Brent Hiles that he left. I wrote a post on my Facebook about this situation and my thoughts, but um, Brent Hiles, who has raised a lot of good children, still in church, serving the Lord, Hiles, Hiles, he wrote this. This is what happens when performative appearance replaces inward Holy Spirit sanctification and obedience. God has never been interested in outward show without the heart. This people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, but their heart is far from me. Matthew 15:8. You can build a system that looks clean, modest, and moral on the outside, but if the heart is never dealt with, sin will come out. This falls on the father. Jim Bob set the course, train up a child in the way he should go. That training starts with law and structure, but it cannot stay there. What we were talking about with law.
Mhm.
The law is not the goal. Wherefore, the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ. Galatians 3:24. You get a short window about 5 to 9 years old where discipline and structure lay the foundation. After that, if you have not transitioned to grace and understanding to a true relationship with Jesus Christ, then what you have built is obedience to rules and not obedience from the heart. And that kind of obedience will not hold. When a child professes faith in Jesus Christ, do we not then teach them what has actually taken place? Do we not teach them that the Holy Spirit now dwells within them? Know ye not that ye are the temple of God and the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, Galatians 5:22. Do we not teach them to listen to his voice and obey it? Most do not. That responsibility gets handed off to the church or a Christian school as if it can be outsourced. That is a massive failure. Then when children are sent out into the world, what do they get from their parents? Not instructions on the spirit, not instruction on the heart. They get outward directives. Dress like this, talk like this, do not do this. And most of that instruction only shows up when it's about to be seen by others. So what is being trained is not holiness, it is presentation, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. And then to take that and put it on display publicly only magnifies the problem. But if we are honest, the same pattern plays out every single week getting ready for church. The focus becomes how it looks, not what is real. The goal is not rule keeping. The goal is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ and a life led by the Holy Spirit. If that is not taught, everything becomes performance. And you do not put your children on display to the world while trying to build that. That is exposing them, not protecting them. I'm a 100% for purity. I'm 100% for modesty. I'm 100% for morality and obedience to God's law, but it must come from the outside, from the inside. Man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Discipline matters. He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but discipline only sets the course. It is most effective early. If you have not done the work by that point, spanking a teenager is not fixing anything. You must grab that heart early, keep that heart, and continually shepherd that heart. You teach them Christ. You live it in front of them. Be thou an example of the believers, and you had better have that relationship yourself. You must also be honest about your own failures. If you live in hypocrisy, your children will see it and use it. Thou therefore which teachest another, teachest thou not thyself? Romans 2:21. We do live in a wicked world. That's not changing, but the answer is not isolation without preparation. It is training them how to live in it, how to avoid it when they can, and how to respond to it when they cannot. Be not conformed to this world. When they reach those early teen years, 11 to 14, and begin to get quiet, you do not let them isolate. You go after them. You learn their interests. If you do not understand it, you learn it. You invest your time. You stay involved. You do not hand them over to themselves. And all through their childhood, Christ must be part of daily life. Not just a scheduled devotion. Thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children when thou sittest, when thou walkest, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. It should be as natural as eating and drinking. That was our approach, not just formal devotions, but constant conversation about God, his word, and what he has done. And serving together, ministry was not separate from family life. This is the same pattern God used with mankind. The law was never meant to save, for by the law is the knowledge of sin, Romans 3:20. It exposes. It points us to Christ, and then we walk in the Spirit. Walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh, Galatians 5:16. The law is not done away with. It is just not enough. It is if what you build is external, it will eventually collapse. If it comes from a heart changed by Christ, it will stand.
Wow.
I know.
Dropping the truth bombs. That was the voice of
I know.
experience right there. So
Yeah.
good job, Brother Hiles. I hadn't seen that, but thank you, Amanda, for the super chat there, and appreciate that very much. But yeah, no, that was we could do a program just on the stuff that he said there, but it echoes a lot of what I think what we've been talking about there. So
Yeah.
that was very good. But yeah, so another thing too that's a possibility, could have been a contributing factor to what happened too, but it is possible that fame and adoration from fans could have went to their heads. You know,
we don't know what it's like to be famous.
No, not at all. But at the same time, the reason I think that way is it does take a pretty high level of arrogance to just think you can get away with certain crimes. That, one of the things that always just blows my mind is, and I don't understand this, maybe somebody can help me out on this, but why do people think they're going to get away with stuff? I don't get it. People who, even a lot of people do like the real bad things like murder and stuff. It's like, did you think you were going to get away with that? Preachers who fall into sin and things like that. I'm just like, did you think you were going to get away with that?
I think they do.
It's like, in my mind, when I just even start to get tempted with most things, I'm just like, I'll get busted. I have no doubt in my mind I will get busted. And it's just like, I don't know. I don't understand the arrogance of some people. And so when you hear these stories about people who molest kids, especially ones that are going to be old enough to remember, it's like, you are going to be in so much trouble. And so I don't know. And somebody can explain this. Maybe they've studied the psychology on this. I haven't. I just feel like you have got to be so arrogant, so full of yourself to think that you can.
That's a huge part of it. I like true crime. And Chris Watts, he was the murderer of Shannon Watts, he literally was so arrogant, thought he could outsmart detectives, that he could outsmart, he tried playing a part for the first few days and really thought he was going to get away with it. And a lot of criminals are like that. They think they're going to outsmart the system.
Yeah.
But
happen. And so not only that too, and the reason I think of the fame and adoration going to their head too, it's like, not only how did you think you can get away with it, it's like, what makes you think you can do something like that to anybody, especially a child? To me, you have to think so low of somebody. I understand. Obviously, I don't understand temptation with children and stuff like that, and I don't want to understand that. But no matter what, it's like, you're doing this to a person. You're doing this to a human being. What makes you able to do that? And I just don't think you can have any love, care, or concern for other people. I think you have to be extremely focused on yourself to think you can get away with the things that you're getting away with. I don't understand it. I don't know if I want to understand it.
I don't think we can, because I do think it's, especially when you're messing with a child as a grown man, you've crossed so many lines at that point. I don't even know how your brain works.
Right. And especially, it's like a friend of the family, like even a stranger. I don't know. Again, there's some places I just don't even want my mind to go.
Yeah.
But when I hear about things like that, I tend to think these people must have extremely elevated opinion of themselves to, it's, obviously they weren't like Epstein level of people, like the billionaire class and all that. But, like these billionaire class, obviously they think they're so far above everyone. They do. They use people and they see them as lower and less than everybody else and almost like animals and things like that. But somebody who comes from a Christian worldview, I don't understand how
Jim Bob has money. Maybe he
thought I don't think he has enough to have that level.
But that was the whole thing with Joseph. That was stupid because he literally committed the crime in one of the states that's cracked down the most on pedophilia.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's weird. I don't know. And again, like even Scott, when he went down, really got him in trouble was the fact that he went into a state where he could get in
Right.
more trouble.
Right.
And it's like, wouldn't you check up on that first?
No, his lust was taking over.
But yeah, and I'm sure he, is it, I keep forgetting Joseph. Yeah, I'm sure he probably wasn't thinking about that. And obviously, for the disclaimers for legal purposes, alleged, alleged
charge.
But either way, he probably wasn't even thinking about the fact.
Yeah. So
yeah, he probably wasn't even thinking about the fact it's Florida and it's more strict. When I'm in other states, I'm not really thinking about what the laws are because I'm not really thinking about breaking any laws. But I would like to think if I were going to do something that I knew is illegal, I would want to check up and find out what the consequences are of that kind of thing first. But I don't know, maybe I don't know.
Kendra Duggar did get arrested. There's been lots of rumors about that, but nothing. She was supposed to have a hearing Monday, but I don't think she did, or no information has come out about it for false imprisonment charges. And I'm thinking, and child endangerment. And I'm thinking some sources are saying that she refused to let CPS interview the kids, which I think in a case where there's a hands-on crime, like he committed, Josh's crime was not hands-on because his was sexual material on his computer. But Joseph Duggars was a hands-on crime. And I think in situations where there's hands-on crimes, they have to interview your kids just because there's that possibility that they too could have been abused or whatever. And I'm hearing that she refused. I don't know if that's true. I think it'll all come out when she has the court hearing. Some people said CPS visited and there was locks on the door. And I guess that's a big no-no for fire hazards and things like that. I think that's a bit excessive to say false imprisonment.
Yeah.
I feel like she just has a spotlight on her right now because of his charges. So I'm really hoping that it was nothing that big. I hope she wasn't abusing the children. I hope it was nothing big because they need a parent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And usually that's with their dad doing these horrific crimes. Honestly, this is my stance on if your husband gets convicted of pedophilia or he's done it, you keep your kids away from him until they're old enough to decide if they want a relationship with him because you have to protect your children at all costs. And he's crossed so many lines at that what's not to say he's not going to abuse your kids. So you are in charge of protecting your children. So I just hope that he gets put in prison. And it's Florida, probably. He's probably facing up to life for even one count. But I hope he gets put in prison until the kids are grown.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my thoughts on it.
But this is true. People don't worry about getting busted, do it because they've done it before.
And usually when there's a victim, there's been previous victims. It's very rare that it's the first victim.
Yeah. And I think that's a common thing with everyone, especially in the Christian world too, because hopefully if you're saved, you've got a fear of God in you. But at the same time, when we sin, God's wrath doesn't always come right away.
No, not all the
which
time.
can, because God gives us space to repent, which can cause us to think, it can get us in more trouble because we start getting emboldened in different things. And
God didn't strike me dead this time.
Right.
So I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it worse.
But that's why I don't know. My brain, I'm just 100% convinced I'm going to get busted for anything that I do. And, and when you're people like us,
you probably would. Both of us would.
I know we would. And, yeah. And so it's like,
not like we don't have people looking at everything in our
lives.
Lives.
And so it's like, it actually helps me knowing that even as we speak, there are people watching just everything we do and say
all the time. People have been looking you up.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have been.
It's like, there are people just waiting for an opportunity to expose me for something.
Yeah.
And God will give them the information for sure if I were to do anything. I have no doubt about that.
Shaking your fist in God's face, I dare you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so I kind of like that those people are there because it helps keep me on the right path because I'm 100% sure I'm going to get busted. But a few more things to try to quickly cover. But a possibility I thought of is they might want, I often think, why did they even do the show? Fame always corrupts, but at the same time, It's,
Money.
they might have
It was the
desperately
love of
needed the
money.
money,
It was money.
because when you have that many kids, you need some money.
It was money. Did
You
you
know,
see how they lived when they started the show? They lived in a
Mm-mm.
teeny tiny house. She pretty much had to do laundry for hours a day. It was, yeah, money.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
love of money.
And so the thing is, it's like they, yeah, they had to have known, hey, we putting our family under the microscope, especially after what happened with Josh.
I don't.
You
Yeah,
would
they
think they
had
would have
the.
known,
They were confident that those were sold records.
right?
That was it.
But
But they
again,
knew that was in there. They knew that skeleton was in their
yeah,
closet.
I remember years ago, I won't mention who they were, but there was a group of people who were very talented, and they ended up going professional, and they were not making any money singing in Baptist churches and things like that. And they went professional, and everybody was just, can you believe this? This one pastor sent out letters to everybody. And, and I remember I was at a meeting somewhere and everybody was talking, and I liked these people. And obviously I didn't agree with the path that they chose, but I like these people. And it kind of bothered me the way everybody was talking about them. I'm a very defensive person. And I remember I was sitting with a group of preachers that were talking about him. And I was like, you know what? I said, I don't really agree with what they decided to do, but you know what? None of us here have ever been tempted with fame and fortune and money because we don't have any their talent.
It's true.
I was like, we don't know what it's like to be talented and to have the ability to do something like that and get famous.
You never had the opportunity.
So I was like, I'm not going to be too upset for them for giving into a temptation that I will never be tempted with. And I said that too, just to insult all of those people. And it's just true, because every single person talking there, we were never going to get tempted with fame and fortune. And here it is, over 15 years later, and none of us have been tempted yet because we weren't that talented. So,
do you want to touch that question or not?
Yeah. So somebody asked, hi, Pastor, I'm curious, how would you compare New IB with IBLP? I mean, they've got a lot of similarities as far as, the homeschool, but the big difference is the New IB is very local church, very, as long as, and the soul winning and all that, the evangelistic. So you have the differences there. Both go to extremes, both too, because of the extremes. When you go to extremes, often people with extreme problems are going to be attracted to extreme things.
That's a good way of putting it.
And being extreme is not always the answer. Again, if you want to be extreme on something because that's just what you want to do. Like, I mean, you love soul winning so much, you go every day. I mean, what a wonderful thing to just love doing. What a wonderful hobby to have. But, not everybody's going to want to do that. And if you just force that, and I don't think people in New IB do that, but again, just whatever it is, the solution for a lot of these people is always go to the extreme. And in the IBLP, we always had these people come through our church. They were always more strict on everything. And they were
more strict, and they let everyone know how strict they were.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They always told you all their standards.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, you could see it too. They dress their women in like skirts down, Amish dresses down to the floor. Some wear head coverings. A lot of IBLP people wear head covering people.
And if your kids ever mention anything that they do that they're not allowed to do, they would make sure, we're not allowed to do that. And so you dealt with that kind of thing all the time. And then, every pastor, my dad was a pastor. When you have a family of 14 kids come to your church, which is a slight exaggeration,
very slight.
Every Baptist preacher likes attendance.
Yeah, exactly.
You like that, right?
Did we mention we don't watch TV?
Oh yeah. They're always going to mention that. And so the thing is, fortunately, my dad never got caught up in that contest of I got to compete with everybody in my church. If people had a standard that was higher than his, he let them have their standard, but, we kept ours where he believed it should be. And I've seen that with other pastors. It's like, they feel like I've always got to be the most hardcore in the church on things. And so they have these people who in reality, many times are hypocrites. Again, they're wearing, they're super strict on the dress, but their boys can't keep their hands off girls and things like
Mm,
that.
yeah.
They have these massive beams in their eyes, and then pastors are going and making their families miserable, enforcing standards they don't even really believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start preaching these things to other people in the church to just drive away normal people. And it's just like, this is dumb. And so, as far as like the differences between the two, they just have different things they go to extremes on. On
But
paper,
they're both man-centered too.
yeah, because
They're
Gothard
very, very
dictated
man-centered.
everything.
Yes. What
but
Gothard said did. What rules Gothard. And interesting fact. Okay, I know more. IBLP is Institute of Basic Life Principles, ran by a man named Bill Gothard, who, interestingly enough, it came out later, he had also been committing sexual sins. He was never married, never had children. I don't know if he was married near the end of his life. Is he still alive?
I thought I heard he got married later,
But it was like to a
I don't
really young
know.
girl. He
Yeah.
always, there's lots of horror stories out there. He always employed very young, beautiful. There was a certain look, long flowing hair, long flowing skirts. They had to be very meek and quiet, and that, I don't know. There was some good things in there,
Mhm.
and then some not so good things. So he has zero experience. I actually went to a Gothard seminar with my mom when I was a teenager, and it weirded me out.
Yeah.
I was very sensitive to things. Even as a teenager, I could really feel the spirit out of different things and different groups we were around. And thankfully, my mom never fell for the whole head covering thing. And so she didn't make a switch on that. But I was very weirded out, and we never went to another one again. So thankfully, that was my only experience with it.
Yes. When it comes to the Bill Gothard crowd, I never went to one of his seminars. I never seen him, met him. I found out from Shiny Happy People they were just in Chicago. I didn't even know they were in Illinois. But at the same time, we did come across a lot of his followers.
Oh, he's 91 now. Wow.
Oh, wow.
Do you know if he ever got married? I'm curious. I thought I had heard that maybe he had, but as far as I know, he never had children.
Yeah. But yeah, they're the followers, they were always just weirdos. And they always came into church. They were super judgmental. They were super critical of everybody. And all the ones that I knew, their kids grew up and they walked away from all that junk.
Turned 18.
All of them.
They were gone at 18.
Yeah. And it was so, yeah. So I obviously never cared for that crowd. And so the thing is too, when it comes to IBLP, New IFB, a lot of times what they are on paper, what they stand up and thump their chest about that they stand for is often pretty good. The things that they point out about themselves, is good. Our soul winning, yeah, that's good. The problem is it's the hypocrisy. The problem is all the bad junk that's there, the lack of balance on things, the lack of grace. And so the specific areas, I guess where they went to extremes were probably
they just
different.
have different extremes. They have different focal points. They have different focuses.
Yeah.
But both groups are extremely out of balance.
Right. So it's like in the new IFB, and I talked about this the other day in church, we kind of use religious systems as a way to elevate ourselves and to put other people down. So like in the new IFB, you're King James, you're soul winner, you got all these things right, you're great. Yeah, but what if you're doing all these terrible things? You just hate soul winning. They distract with all the things that they do. And, you can do a whole bunch.
Throwing a wet blanket on soul winning.
Yeah, you can do a whole bunch of good things, but, one sinner destroyeth much good. Yeah. So I can go do all these wonderful things. And, and I, for years, I've served the Lord. But if I go across the street and hold up the Casey's tonight and I steal $200, I will destroy my reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get to talk about I've given way more than $200, to our church and other people throughout my lifetime. I've gone soul winning. I've raised good kids. But you also robbed the gas station. You're going to jail. Yeah, but I've done. Doesn't matter. It's the same thing too. When it comes to going to heaven, we can talk about all the good things we've done. We can profess our many wonderful works, but we've sinned as well. And the wages of sin is death. Mm-hmm. And so you can try to distract all you want. And so in the IBLP world, while they were not soul winners, they were not evangelistic. Well, they were still better than all of us because, they don't watch Disney movies. They don't.
They wear head coverings.
Yeah. they don't have a microwave in their house.
And I want to say too
Yeah.
about the women in my life personally that I've known who wore head coverings and made such a big deal out of it. They were the leader in the home.
Oh yeah.
They decided they were going to wear the head coverings. They decided they were going to be covered up like a ninja in a snowstorm. They decided all these things, and their husband just, yes, okay, honey, yes, honey. And then when they decided they were done, they were done.
Oh yeah.
And I would see a woman in a head covering yelling at her husband.
Oh yeah. Most of the Gothard people, I'll say one difference. If there was spousal abuse going on in the Gothard crowd, it was probably the women abusing the men.
Yeah, it was.
So
nice
yeah. That was one. So there were some definite differences, but it was usually the women leading the home.
Yeah,
now,
which is so funny because that was what their whole thing was built. Remember the umbrella?
Yes.
That was the whole concept. It was like God, then the husband, then
but
the
it was
mom,
a big
and the
joke.
children.
It was a big joke in that crowd because, of course, the husband was the home. I mean, just ask the wife; she'll tell you.
Yeah.
It's like, So, if they were ever having a counseling session or talking with the pastor about something, it was always they would tell you, the pastors, they all had the same testimony. It was always the wife they were talking to the whole time, and they'd be like, tell him, and they would tell the husband what to say to the pastor because the husbands didn't care. It was the women that got all caught up in the seminars, that bought all the books, that watch all the videos, and they would watch these things all day. And the husband would come home from work, and then it's like, yes, dear, whatever, dear, so it was usually the mom implementing all that stuff. So it definitely was a much more female dominated system.
That's exactly it, Brother Mark. It was, I have seen some of the meanest women I've ever seen are like holiness, Pentecostal, charismatic.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt about that. So, but yeah, there's other things too, but those are some major, major differences between the two. But I can understand why people, see them the same in many ways. But another thing I had too is they might have genuinely believed their ways were biblical, but just had very bad influences in their life that negatively affected their children. Because again, extreme methods often attract people with extreme problems. And they, a lot of the stuff too that I think, happen, a lot of these things would happen with other families, and who knows what their kids got subjected to. But for some reason, that Gothard crowd, because they were so extreme, they attracted people who had major problems, and I think they thought we need to do something major to fix these major problems. But you're still sinning when you go too far to the right. We're not to turn to the right hand or to the left hand. And, and so
but church is the same way too. Churches can attract the best of the best or the worst of the worst.
Right. Yeah. And, so, that is part of it. You're always going to have some bad eggs in every movement and every church. And you do have to be careful. And maybe maybe they got around some bad people that were corrupting influences that did put on a good show. They came in, they knew exactly how to dress, at the event. And that's how it was too, like I've heard stories too about different events and things where Duggars were going to be present. You'd see just a multitude of people who looked just like the Duggars, because you just have kind of the copycat followers and things like that. People like my wife that was mistaken for a Duggar.
I have natural curly hair. A lot of them in long natural curly hair. That was why. Brown hair, brown eyes, wearing a skirt, natural curly hair. It's just, I do kind of look like a Duggar.
Right.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah. So the thing is, and when you're always talking about that stuff, when you're always bringing those things up, well, now everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do. And so it's kind of like when people come and visit our church for the first time, it's like if they watch you online, they kind of know what things you like, they know what you're for, and they know exactly what to say. And
we meet people all the time who they know us, but we don't know them.
Right.
It's kind of a weird feeling in a way, just because of our podcasts.
Yeah. So that's another thing. And then,
yep, I do have similar hair, just not the big bangs.
Yeah. But they might have majorly been lacking grace in their homes. And one of the things too,
I wouldn't say that so
well,
much
here's
about
why
the
I think that.
Duggars, really.
Here's and when I say that, because there's more than one ways we can
Because she
show a
talked
lack of
like
grace,
this all the time and
right?
never yelled.
But no, here's another way we can show a lack of grace. What they often talked about their past, like she would talk about how she used to dress, and a
That they use
lot,
birth control a
yeah, and
little
how they used to
bit.
use birth control and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe I am projecting other Gothard people that I knew over the years, but many of the Gothard crowd that we knew that had came through our church growing up, they beat the tar out of themselves for their past. And
Yeah, you're right.
it's just like, hey, it's okay. A lot of people, they didn't know any better. You weren't saved. You were raised up. What do you expect? And it's like, the truth now. Thank God you got out of it. Forgive yourself for what you did in the past. But a lot of times that it's like they go super far to the right, almost as like penance for all the things they had done wrong
No,
in the
that's a good
past.
point, because even still, when she goes and she gives her testimony, she cries even
I
still
know.
now.
And it's like, and I'm
Like she's not gotten, oh, okay, God, that's Under the Blood. They like that song,
yeah,
Under the Blood.
I always called that song the Duggar anthem.
Yeah, they like that song, Under the Blood, but then they don't live by it because she
Yeah.
still has like all this remorse. And I understand.
And I'll hear her talk about the stuff they used to do, and I'm just like, hopefully I'm not just being a liberal, but I'm like, it's not that bad. It could have been a whole lot worse.
Yeah.
And it sure looks like the Lord's been being pretty good to you people. And I remember my dad, he told that to a lady in the church. They were one of these Gothard people, and she just beat the tar out of herself. She was always after church. I remember it was a regular occurrence to, like, after service was over, they always sat behind me, and I would like get out of my pew and I would start walking to the back, and she and her husband, and always led by her, they would be sitting down, kind of like holding hands and praying, and she'd be crying. And for some reason, she always had her hair up, but she'd have her hair down when she was doing this. And
her hair is given to her for a covering.
Yeah. So
that's why she was using her hair as a covering. Her long hair.
I wasn't familiar with that practice. But anyway, and she'd just be crying after service all the time, just super upset. And my dad would talk to her, and she was just upset about her past because she had been divorced in the past, and she had 2 children from a previous marriage, and one of them was rebellious.
In some circles, that is the biggest sin.
And I mean, and it's, obviously it's terrible, but she had been married to the husband she had now for at least 13 or 14 years. Cause that's how old their oldest kid they had together, when they had like another 5 or 6 kids together, and just sweet kids. I mean, just the sweetest kids. They're all healthy. And she just was always, she's like, I just feel like God hates me. I feel like God's mad at me for, my sins of the past and all these things. And my dad's just like, my dad finally was like, what are you talking about? It's like, you got a husband that loves you. You've got 7, wonderful, healthy children. Why can't you just appreciate what God's given you and enjoy it? But she couldn't get over her past and constantly had to beat herself up for it. And often people,
did she even understand what salvation was then?
I don't know. I really don't know. It was just, I don't know if it bothered her. She wasn't like some of the other Gothard families where they were all on their original husband and had only one baby daddy. But
baby daddy.
either way, things were going pretty good. Now I looked them up on Facebook a while back, and the only one who looked like she was doing good is actually living over in Israel, hardcore Zionist. She lives with the I'm not sure what exactly she's doing over there, but she's over in Israel, where the rest of them, it's like all pictures of them drinking and stuff. And I'm just like,
that worked out well.
Wow. And interestingly enough, oh wait, no, that was another family. But I don't want to get mixed up.
I knew where your brain was going.
But it was just, I remember we went and ate at their house one day, and they were very natural people. We ate corn on the cob that they had grown in their own backyard, and it was disgusting. There was like no salt,
no butter,
no butter, no salt,
nothing.
And I was
good.
like, yeah. I asked if they had any salt, and they're like, no, and it's not healthy. It was like the most natural meal. It was so
salt is so
bland.
healthy.
it was the most bland meal I ever ate in my life. Because
And
they
you've
were
never
just
forgotten it though.
ultra. Yeah, I've never forgotten how nasty that meal was. And it was probably the most healthy stuff I ever ate. But at the same time, she died of cancer. Should have ate the salt,
Should have eaten the salt and the
then she
butter.
died happy.
Yep.
But that's how those people were. And so the thing is, when I listen to the Duggars talk about themselves that way, and it's clear they've just not gotten over these things, rather than just being thrilled with where they're at, I mean, even if it was that bad, it's like, okay, here's where you are now. You should be thrilled. God has been good.
Part of it's probably like a testimony type thing though.
Yeah, but so
like they're sharing their testimony or whatever.
Right. But it's like, if you're not able to forgive yourself in those things, you're probably not giving grace to other people either.
No, that's a good point.
And
yeah.
it's like,
yeah.
Are the expectations that they have for their children too much? And I think sometimes parents can think, their kids are going to be perfect. And it's just like, that's just not going to happen. No, your kids are going to make all kinds of mistakes. They're going to mess up. And you can make them feel like, you can put unrealistic expectations on them and just cause them to want to give up. And so, I don't know. These are all things we should all be thinking about. And I wanted to talk about this because, again, don't let the Eric Swarzinskis, discourage you.
Love you, Eric.
And steer you. No, he's been reprobated. We're not allowed to.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
Sorry. Take it back.
Yeah. No, don't let people like him discourage you away from things that are biblical. Okay.
Purity culture.
Yeah. It's
standards.
But at the same time, too, recognize we're dependent on grace. Recognize there are no guarantees with these things. You can go and you can institute a bunch of rules. You can make your kids wear t-shirts that have those rules on them. You can write them on the whiteboard in your house. You can make them say them every day. At the end of the day, if it's not in their heart, it's just not going to work, and that's what you've got to watch for. You really got to watch for the heart of your kids. And then, even after they grow up, something might steal their heart away, that can happen. I don't know. And this one that just messed up, isn't he like in his 30s?
Him and Kendra have been married over a decade.
Yeah. So he's like in his 30s.
Yeah.
So a lot can happen to somebody in 10 years.
And some of our kids might eventually embarrass us too.
Again, and that's why too.
None of us are perfect.
It's like, I don't like talking
about
those things too much. Yeah. I don't like acting like we did everything right. And here's the proof. Because it's like, well, it's looking good right now. But again, things can change. If our children start getting involved in sin, then who knows where that can lead. And so, so again, with Josh, it's a different situation. That was when he was real young. This other one, a lot of time out of the home. And so I wouldn't even throw out everything the Duggars say and teach and stand for. They did stand for a lot of good things, promoted a lot of good things. I think they helped make a lot of people like us feel normal. And I think that's why our family liked watching them. And, but were they perfect? No. And I hope this didn't come across like a Duggar bash. When it came to all these things I mentioned, I'm just saying, maybe it's possible. And these are just all things that I've observed, I've considered that we ought to think about. And, when it comes to the Duggars, I would gladly have Jim, Bob, and Michelle or any of the kids on here to talk about these things and give their opinion on stuff. Cause, I definitely don't hate the Duggars. I've always liked them for the most part.
I wish since this was,
I don't like IBLP.
No, I don't like IBLP. This is one thing that I wish would happen. They spent so many years on the show, right? And promoting their ideals, talking about their ideals. Why can't we hear what they have to say now? Where did they mess up? And it's not even that affected. Okay. It's not even all them. I understand that the kids are older and they have to make their decisions, but this sexual stuff has affected so many members of their family
Mhm.
because it wasn't just Josh. He had victims. His
Mhm.
sisters were his victims. And when I watched that interview where they're talking about it, they were still carrying a lot of pain
Mhm.
into their marriages, which now their husbands are helping them work through this baggage and work through this pain. You know, their husbands are helping them through. So now it's affected that generation. I do think some of the older kids, some of the girls, I think they've seen the areas that need to be worked on in their family unit,
Mhm.
and they're trying to change it for their family.
Right.
You know, so
Yeah.
I think overall they're good. It's a good family. It's just, can we have some like introspection? Can you tell us, you know, maybe you were too over the top in this. Maybe you weren't you weren't strict. I'd just like to know their
Right.
thoughts.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to bash them. We're not trying to rub their nose into anything,
No.
but the thing is, they are just kind of an iconic family
Right.
that we all kind of get associated with. And these things that have happened have really given a black eye to many things they stand for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be interested in hearing what they have to say. I think there's legitimate questions that people have, and maybe they don't think they did anything wrong. Okay. And if that's the case, well, I'd be interested in that, and then I would have some opinions about that. But if they do realize what they did wrong, you know, tell people so they don't make the same mistake. People look to them as an example in many ways. They put themselves out there as an example. They promoted, all the things that they practiced in their life, and they stood for many things that I think were good. And so they put themselves out there as this example. And so when things go really bad like that, I do think they kind of owe the world some kind of response. And there's plenty of people out there who would love to interview them about these things. And as far as I know, I don't think they've ever really done any kind of interview about the Josh situation or anything like that.
No, but
And
we can't pay them enough. So.
I know. And yeah, I have no money to offer them when it comes to an exclusive interview, but I can guarantee you they would get the most fair questions, the most honest questions, the ones people need to hear. And I I would definitely give them that. But I wouldn't have no money.
Can you speak to people who are trying to follow a model and the dangers of following certain teachings, even within the home, trying to model yourself after someone just because they did it before you see the fruit of that?
Yeah. And you never want to just blindly follow anybody.
Yeah.
Because again, too, maybe for some reason, the Duggars felt the need to be more extreme on certain things.
We don't know all the reasons.
Right. Maybe the stuff with Josh, there was kind of a reaction to what happened there. We can't let this happen again. And maybe they went a little too far.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know what happened with him. We don't know what caused that. There's, no two families are exactly alike. So the thing is, everybody needs to learn how to eat the meat and spit out the bones. Everybody needs to learn whether they're listening to a pastor, any example that they're following, listen, figure out how to apply what you're hearing to your life and your situation, because everybody has different situations, and there's a way that I teach in our church to handle your kids, discipline your kids. But there's been situations before where we've had people in our church who were from broken homes, and a lot of times, they're raising a kid who has another parent who doesn't have the same beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've got a different situation now, because this is no longer just between you and your wife. It's between you and your wife and this other person. You might not have the ability to do what the rest of us are doing. Doesn't mean you can't learn some things, but unfortunately, the religious world, they attract, a lot of people just want to join a cult. Let's just face it. A lot of people want to be in a cult. They want to just blindly follow somebody, because they do. They think, if I do all these rules right here, guaranteed success. No, there's no such thing as guaranteed success. Again, I can give you my 10 biggest tips that I think have helped our family or whatever. And, at the end of the day, if I did, you would be wise to just listen and then just figure out how that'll work in your family. You got to know your family. You got to know your marriage. And this one size fits all mentality, it just doesn't work. And somewhere along the lines, a big portion of our country has just lost their ability to think and just, take things, apply to your situation, and go from there. But
McMurtry's are different. We're our own family unit. We do things our own way. We do what works for us, and we don't do what doesn't work for us.
Yeah, and there's probably stuff that we do I wouldn't recommend.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Every family is different.
It's just like, this works for us. And and maybe that's why too, people's like, you get accused of not being a hard preacher. Well, it's because I don't just get up and this is how it is for everything in every situation. That's what some people want. They want you to just get up there and scream at them exactly what to do. And it's like, hey, sometimes there's 4 different right things you can do in this situation. This is what I would do. And I would recommend eating cheese.
Me too.
I think that's the secret to my success right there.
Not
eating cheese.
But I love cheese. So I do eat cheese.
But my lack of it balances things out and makes up for your failures in that area.
For my love of it.
But yeah. So anyway, those are just my thoughts that I wanted to cover. Do you have any final words?
No, I mean, it's a complex thing. We don't know we don't know what went on in that home. There could be a succession of events. There could be a string of events that led up to, but somewhere along the way, something went wrong. I don't know what it was. And their zeal for trying to make sure that this didn't happen again, the sin of it almost made it worse in a way. So yeah, I agree with everything Brent Hiles' comment said. I mean, one thing I promoted on my channel is it's the heart. You got to get to the heart. Why are we disciplining our kids? Is it just to say we discipline them just to prove to others how hardcore we are? Or is it because we're trying to get to the root of the issue? We're trying to get to the heart of the issue. And just using God as a boogeyman for the rest of their lives isn't going to work. If they don't believe it in their heart, as soon as they turn 18, they're going to go whatever way they want. And I know with the Duggar kids, it was when they were older. So maybe their lack of experience played into that. I don't know. But you would think with the way it went for Josh, it would have scared off the rest of the brothers into never doing anything again. But I mean, maybe Joseph was what was needed. I don't know.
Yeah. I think here's a good way to kind of illustrate it. They're in society. There are, in reality, 2 different rules for 2 different groups. In society, we have laws, but at the same time, too, in America, we consider ourselves a free country. Now, there is another society within our society that has very different rules. Those places are called prisons. They have a lot more rules than we do, and it's because those people are really bad people. They are unruly people that can't make it in civilized society, so they have to be told when to go to bed. They do have to be locked in their rooms at night. Everything has to be structured in their life because they're really bad people. And you know what? Maybe you've got really bad kids and you've got a really messed up family. And so you need a prison system in your home. But the thing is, everybody wants to escape from a prison. And typically the people in prison, we've already kind of lost the battle there. But you know what? The people in prison definitely shouldn't be criticizing the people outside of prison who go to bed when they want, who are enjoying freedom, who eat what they want, and do all these things. There are people who are responsible with their freedom. And there are people out there who, they enjoy their liberty in Christ, not to give into the lust of the flesh, not to be lascivious, but they truly experience liberty in Christ, and they're truly happy people. They're not worried about every little, they're not walking around on eggshells in their life, and they don't even seem to have that many rules because, they're just naturally good functioning people. And so understand, you're going to see families out there. Yeah, they don't seem to have a whole lot of rules. Others have a lot more. Well, I wouldn't always just assume the people with all the rules are the good ones. They might have all that for a reason. It's like at our church, every year we have the Singspiration. And that's a service that's pretty much all music. And we've been doing that for almost 14 years, and we have no rules. We have no rules.
We didn't get a Jason and Tommy rule.
No.
Because they wanted a rule named after them.
Yeah. So, and here's how you say, so you guys allow rap music and rock music and, whatever, during the Singspiration. Well, we don't want that to happen, but here's what we always tell people, because we don't approve the song list or anything like that. It's very impromptu. All right. Who's got the next special? We just let whoever come up. And we always tell people, if it's questionable, don't do it. Because if somebody were to get up and do a Christian rap, I believe that would be inappropriate. Mm-hmm. And so then we would have to make a rule that says no Christian rap. And what we've said is, if you inspire a rule, the rule will be named after you. So if Cassandra did a Christian rap, it would be the Cassandra rule. And just like we have the Chloe rule on
Christmas party
during the Christmas party, because of something she did
when she was like 4,
like 14 years ago. We did the white elephant gift exchange, and you can take other people's gifts, and somebody took her gift and she cried.
She was 4, but that's beside the point. It's still the Chloe rule.
She was probably like 5 or 6.
Oh.
but to this day, we call it the Chloe rule. Every year we announce the Chloe rule, that if we tell the kids, if somebody takes your present, you're not allowed to cry. That's part of the game. And it's always a struggle for little kids. But
they've come close.
But Chloe still hears about it. Yes. And so, so the thing is, our church, we have normal people. So nobody tries doing a Christian rap, an interpretive dance, or anything like that. And so we don't have any rules. But
no music. None of that.
Tommy and Jason, what they did one year, they got up and they sang a patriotic song. Thinking,
it's like Battle Hymn of Republic.
But yeah, it was one that was in the hymn book.
Yeah.
And I think they were hoping that I would ban patriotic songs, which would result in a rule getting named after them. But
that was the furthest our kids have pushed it.
Yeah. But
a patriotic song.
So, but anyways, I'm still all about eating cheese, listen to Spirit of Prophecy, and I'm all out of cheese.
I feel your pain. That's a sad place to be in.
But anyway, so those are just some nuggets of wisdom. And again, I would recommend praying for the Duggar family and all involved. And I still don't want to hate on or anything like that. But
this is a horrible sin. It's horrible when there are kids involved. But
I'm not talking about Josh or Joseph.
No, like the rest that's so humiliating.
Yeah. If one of my kids turned out to be a pervert,
parent,
I would be devastated.
Even imagine.
Yeah, I would be devastated if that were to happen. And we are allowed to feel bad and to pray for the victims for sure. But then also just the family members, it's awful. But the perverts, I hope all kinds of bad things happen to them. And I
hope they're kept away from their kids.
And I hope God gives the family grace, to deal with all that, because that is going to be a very difficult thing for them.
Especially when you're famous, and it's every other article across my feed is the Duggars.
Yeah.
About the Duggars.
Yeah. And I saw a video today of some guy like out by their house.
Yeah.
Harassing them. It's just like,
and they were talking about how mean she was. Not mean. She was.
Well, she was upset.
She was upset, but she has a right to tell him to get off her property.
I probably would have been way worse.
No,
I think you would have been way worse.
Oh, I would have been way worse. No, but man, I don't talk like that.
Yeah.
And you would,
and you wouldn't have talked like that.
No, I would have told them, I'm calling the police if you do not leave my property right now. And she was a little more upset than I've ever seen her. Mm-hmm. But she still, she didn't use foul language. She didn't cuss them out. She didn't even really yell at them.
Yeah.
But.
Yep. So, well, anyway, I appreciate everybody watching this. Make sure you subscribe to Gently Led Sisters if you haven't yet. And a lot of great content for your wife. And I'm sure she will be blessed by it. And appreciate you watching this. We are the podcast everyone's talking about. In fact, my wife's on here is really going to get everybody talking about it now, because she is just giving parts of the internet world fits, and I think it's pretty awesome.
And I don't care, and I stand by everything I say on my public podcast. So
yeah, and so anyway, thank you all for watching. We'll see y'all next time. God bless.
Goodbye.